We are Southeastern 16 as we're covering SEC football. And this week we're spending a lot of time on the big game Saturday night as Alabama hosting Georgia. We're going to talk from an Alabama perspective now. Former Tide offensive lineman Mike Johnson joining us now with Cover Crimson and 92.9 The Game over in Atlanta. Mike, appreciate you hopping on talking about this big game with us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Honestly, it's there's a lot of build up to this one. It has been all off season. You just mentioned it. I'm in Atlanta, so man, I'm right in the thick of it over here in the state of Georgia, and I'm ready to see it happen.
So we're 4 games into the season now. Just as you've been watching Alabama this season, your thoughts 4 games in, where kind of this Alabama team stands. What's their identity at this point of the year?
Identity's tough, right? I mean, I feel like they've kind of hit all the check marks, as has Georgia, which is a good thing. Of like blow somebody out, struggle, and then blow out a non-conference opponent that you expect to give you a good game. I don't know what they are. I know they're explosive offensively. They've got a really good group of offensive skill players. I think the receivers are better than you thought they'd be. I love the way the front sevens come along, but they're also a team that has, beaten themselves a couple of times. When you look at the South Florida game, the amount of penalties, they got some things to clean up. So I don't know that I've ever questioned what exactly Bama is to this extent that I have right now. I'm not really sure what they are. They're Bama under Kalen DeBoer, and we're going to know obviously a lot more on Saturday night about what their identity is. But they're explosive. They play sound defense, and so far that's as far as I can go.
As far as the offensive line goes, position you're familiar with, and injury has been somewhat of an issue for Alabama along the offensive line in the first part of the season. Your thoughts on this offensive line specifically, and how they're going to help this offense this year?
I was curious what exactly this unit would be. Specifically when Caden Proctor leaves in the spring and heads to Iowa, you're not sure what exactly you're going to get. And then all of a sudden, Caden Proctor's back, and then all of a sudden, Parker Brailsford transfers down from Washington. Tyler Booker's back at left guard. You go up against South Florida, and Wilkin Formby, the backup, quote unquote, backup right tackle struggles. Elijah Pritchett comes back in. I think fully healthy, this is one of the top 3 units in the country. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think the things that Kalen DeBoer has asked them to do up front allows them to be physical. And to kind of take the fight. I don't know that they had that last year under Tommy Rees. I think there was a lot of kind of second guessing and a lot of reacting to what you had to do up front and to which way the defense is going. So far under Kalen DeBoer, it's like, dude, we want you to roll off the ball and hit anybody in your way, right? And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing as an offensive lineman. But all the talent in the world, all the sides in the world seemingly, and I think that when they are playing together and as a 5-man unit and they're 100% healthy, I think they're as good as it gets.
So what does it take? What does a good offensive lineman look like? Like when a coach looks for an offensive lineman, what are the things that they look for?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Let me start here. It looks a lot different now than it did when I was playing ball. It's so funny, man. I got a chance to go over for the Saban Field commemoration a couple of weeks ago when they did play South Florida. And you're looking at some of these linemen, like, you're looking at Caden Proctor. I'm like, dude, I had a pretty good run in college, and I didn't stand a chance of playing when some of these guys would have been in the program back then. Like, thank God I got in when I did, man. These guys have changed. It's nothing to see, 340, 350, 360-pound offensive linemen at time. I mean, Bama had a lineman a few years ago, Evan Neal, that got drafted to the Giants, one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. You have that, thick midsection, the kind of high ass they used to call it, that allows you to roll guys off the ball. You have to have long arms, but they have to be, strong long arms, really chesty, ability to press guys off of you. But more than anything, to me, it's strength and the ability to kind of do that power clean motion, to roll guys out of the box, and then also to move your feet, man. You don't want to be so heavy that you can't move side to side and kind of take on some of the speed rushers that you see in the SEC. So play to your strength. How about that for an answer? No matter what your intangibles are, you play to your strengths, and you can find a way to do it up front.
With this offense of Alabama, you mentioned the line when they're healthy, strong. With the rest of the offense, Jalen Milroe, quarterback, and some really good receivers, like you mentioned, Ryan Williams, one of those guys. Like the offense as a whole, what do you see different under Kalen DeBoer than maybe you did under Coach Saban as far as scheming, but also the play of like Jalen Milroe?
Well, I think first and foremost, they have invited the ability to run Jalen Milroe in design runs. And that's, the power and counter concepts, the gap schemes, the pulling guards. I think for whatever reason, Tommy Reese, a lot of times last year was a little more timid to actually design runs for Jalen Milroe. You get Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan in there. They're like, let's do it. Let's go empty backfield. Let's run, a speed motion action and let's counter off the backside. And let's motion all four wide receivers to the right side of this thing and let's leave nobody kind of protecting the edge backside. So I think that's the biggest difference. I do still want to see certain parts of this Alabama offense continue to kind of build and the chemistry continue to build, because I do think that they probably rely a little bit too much on the vertical passing game. But just as a unit, their ability to utilize the gap scheme and utilize Jalen Milroe's legs within that gap scheme, I think makes them completely different than they were a year ago. Albeit, I think that they had a lot of success running Jalen Milroe in the SEC title game against this Georgia defense. But it's just done in a different way this year that I think makes them a little bit more exciting when he has the ball.
Saturday night, first SEC game for Kalen DeBoer, first SEC game of the season. It just so happens to be against Georgia, and one of the toughest games Alabama has on the schedule this year. What do you make of this matchup? I mean, I think we're still learning a lot about both teams at this point, but just your early thoughts on this matchup and how it could play out.
It's weird because I think it's been for Alabama fans, it's kind of been a roller coaster of emotions, and most of the Georgia fans I talk to kind of feel the same way. Like you go through the offseason, and I think both these teams kind of went through highs and lows in the offseason. I think Georgia was really rejuvenated by the return of Carson Beck and some of the other pieces that they needed. I think Bama, it's like, Saban's leaving. What's going to happen? Then Kalen DeBoer steps in. You had the mass exodus into the portal, and then you're able to get some guys back in April and everything else. So that continues into the season, right? You open up and Bama, Bama blows out Western Kentucky, and Georgia ends up running away against Clemson. You stub your toe against South Florida if you're Bama, and Georgia stubs their toe against Kentucky. I don't think either one of these teams really have an identity, to be quite honest with you. I think that they're still trying to find who their playmakers are at Georgia, without Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. And I still think that they're still, kind of trying to find who you turn to in crunch time if you're Alabama on offense, besides Jalen Milroe. I think Ryan Williams is a nice piece. I think Kendrick Law is a nice piece. Jeremy Bernard's a nice piece, but they have to be able to really understand in crunch time when you're getting blitz and your back's against the wall who to turn to as well. So I love the matchup. I almost feel like I was probably leaning towards Georgia having a better shot at this thing until the Tate Ratledge injury at right guard for Georgia last weekend. I think that is just a massive knock to Georgia right now. And obviously I'm an offensive lineman, so I pay attention to that kind of stuff. But I don't know what to think, man. I honestly don't. And I keep getting that question. And we talk about it all the time on the radio here in Atlanta. I think it is going to be a chess match. And who can make the changes in the second, the third, and into the fourth quarter defensively, offensively to try to attack the other team, I think that's who will win. I also think that Bama has to stay out of the penalty zone and prove that they can play penalty-free football much in the way that you expect Georgia to, under Kirby Smart. So great matchup, man. I think that, it's going to be a physical game like it always is when these two teams take the field.
Do you see Alabama's defense able to penetrate the offensive line of Georgia and put pressure on Carson Beck?
I actually do. And I've been pleasantly surprised with what you have up front, with Q Robinson. I think Quay Russaw is a guy for Alabama that's kind of nicked up and dinged up, and you wonder what you're going to have. But the speed that, Jahad Campbell and some of the other pieces, LT Overton, the speed that some of these guys are playing with, it almost looks like it's in a different gear. Bama got to be in the mid-2015s where they were a little bit of a lumbering defense up front. They didn't always have great edge rushers. And even when they did, Coach Saban didn't always allow these guys to rush the edge. It was like get to the depth of the quarterback and then press back into his lap and see if you can affect the throw. But, man, these guys look athletic up front. On the flip side, I don't know that Georgia is what they have been in the past on the offensive front. I think that Bama has the better offensive line in this matchup. I think Xavier Truss is good. I don't know that he's elite. I think that you have good depth behind Tate Ratledge. I don't know that any of them are elite. And so I think that's a check mark in Bama's column when you look at the way this front seven should be able to attack Georgia's front. Now, will they be able to actually put it out there in practice? I think that's another question left to be decided.
Well, I mean, it should be fun in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You've played, of course, in that stadium many times, and people like to talk about you get the home field advantage. Playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium in a game like this, do you feel like that will help Alabama in this game?
I don't think there's any doubt that it helps Alabama. Just from the simple fact that you're not playing in Athens, which is a raucous environment in of itself. Bama definitely has a way, and I love the fact this is a home game. A night game and a home game. You know what I mean? Like, I think that sends things to the next level in Bryant-Denny. I think you sometimes used to have the 2:30 Central games where it was kind of hit or miss whether you got the raucous crowd or not. Nick Saban used to mention it all the time. Hey, we're going to need you to show up. I think, in fact, it's a night game. I think things will probably hit the next level. And I think the good thing, though, for Georgia is you do have veterans, right? I mean, Carson Beck has been in some pretty loud environments. He can keep his composure. They'll be able to kind of get over the hump that way. But I think it's huge for Bama not to be involved in that. We saw them struggle, on the road at Auburn last year, and some of these other environments they've been to with Jalen Milroe at quarterback hadn't always been good. So hopefully they can kind of, pull ahead on that one and, use that crowd to their advantage. And the defense has got to give them something to be loud about, though. They got to be able to rush the edge and affect the passer as well.
Well, it should be fun. Mike, really appreciate you coming on and previewing this matchup with us. We'll catch up with you again soon, but thanks for doing this today.
Anytime, man. Roll Tide.
We got you covered here on Southeastern 16 as we get you ready for Alabama and Georgia and all things SEC.